coming in. This is Mike's Music Guitar Clinic. We're going to check out a lot of guitars today. So I said, when I came in, I said, you were really serious about bringing guitars. So how many guitars do you have?
We brought 37.
37 guitars, plus some people brought some to show off too. So if we have some time, want to make sure if you brought a guitar, we'll try to get enough time that Mike can tell you about it, talk about it. But I'll let you get started. So thank you for coming in. Grab yourself a beer. If you got any questions about the beer, just ask me. I'll be back here. And without further ado, Mike Reeder from Mike's Music.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. Thanks for having us. All right, guys. I don't know if any of you were here last time. How many people were here last time? Show of hands. Anybody? He was here. He was here. Okay, cool. Well, most everyone here knows me, so I won't waste time saying who I am. But besides having a music store, I'm kind of an obsessive collector. And one of the things that I like to do is collect Les Pauls. About 10 years ago, I had in my head that I was going to get every version of every Les Paul from the classic period. And what that means to me is from 1952 to 1963, when they said Les Paul, or they had the features of the ones that he was involved with. So I went on a quest to collect every version of every Les Paul from that time period. And over the course of about 8 years, I ended up getting pretty much all of them. And what I learned in that process was that there is a never-ending amount of minutia. From every single model to, just all kinds of oddballs. And one thing Gibson did is they would do things different, even on the basic models, and most people wouldn't notice it. They would move where the tailpieces were, they would alter the way the colors looked, they would change the size of the pick guards, the keys, and all these little things that most people didn't notice or care about. Over the time in the Les Paul world, certain things became more desirable than others, and a lot of times the reason that would happen would be because a rock star would be playing a guitar, and that guitar would be the magical guitar anybody wanted. And that happened to 59 Les Pauls. 59 Les Pauls, or the Les Paul Burster Standard, was played by people like Jimmy Page and just all the major rock stars. So it became a very desirable Les Paul. And that's kind of the king of Les Paul collecting, is the Burst. I bought a lot of guitars, so I'm just going to plow right into that. The first thing I'm going to start with is juniors. I will say in my collection, I also have melody makers, just because I felt like they were part of the family, but I didn't bring any because that would take too long. So I'm going to start with Les Paul Juniors, and I'll start with the earliest one I have. This is a really early 55 Les Paul Jr. or TV model, and it looks almost natural. If you notice, there's like almost no yellow. TV is typically thought of as yellow. This is one of the cleaner guitars I've ever owned. It's basically dead mint. I mean, there might be a scratch on it. I bought it out from a friend of mine he's another collector out of Louisville, who bought it from the original owner. And I bought it because it was a perfect example of a very rare guitar. And I bought this in the height of the guitar madness of probably like 2001. And I paid way too much money for this guitar. But it's really cool, and I'll probably keep it forever. So that is a version of a very early TV model, Les Paul Jr. Actually, they were never really called Les Paul Juniors when they were this finished. They were only called TV models, but people consider them Les Paul Juniors in TV finish. But actually, this guitar is a TV model. So I'm going to set this up. Another thing I want to say is, some of the guitars I didn't represent because you see them all the time. Typically on these Les Paul Juniors, they're sunburst. Basically all of them were sunburst. And then they made some TV models. And I think I did bring one somewhere, I just haven't found it yet. This is the next version of that guitar, and this is typically what people think of as a TV model. It is more of a wheat colored yellow. This is a 57. I skipped 56 just because basically they're the same guitar. The only difference between a 57 and a 56 is that in 57 they move the bridge farther back, which some people believe affects the tone. I will say, in my opinion, things like that, although they do affect the tone, every guitar is different. So you can have 40 of these and none of them are going to sound exactly the same. It's not just because the bridges move back. It's a combination of pickup and a whole bunch of other things. But this one is like featherweight and a pretty nice example of a 57. This guitar is one of my personal favorite guitars. There's a 58. This is a 58 TV model, or what some people would call TV finish Les Paul Jr. The cool features of a 58, this is when they first go to the double cut. So from 54 up into 58, they are that single cutaway. And the colors gradually get up to that wheat color. It gets slowly more yellow. By the time we get to 58, they're like this. This guitar is extremely yellow, and typically they would be more kind of orangey because they would yellow. But this one is like also super, super clean, so it hasn't aged very much. And if you'll notice, this is very square. And the next guitar I'll show you, it'll be really rounded. Gibson, when they first made this model, the bodies were very square. And also the pick guards are slightly different, which I would it's hard to see, but if I took a guard off another one and set it up here, you would notice this guard is wider. So yeah, that's a really clean 58. Okay, another thing that happened when they went to the double cut juniors is they stopped doing the sunburst ones. So when they were doing the single cut juniors, every guitar was sunburst. And then the special ones were TV. And then when they went to the double cut models, all the guitars were factory cherry or just cherry, like this guitar. It's faded, you can see the black, it's a lot more red on the back. So this is what a Les Paul Jr. became in 1958, would be this finish with a square body. This one is actually, this is a 59, and it is what every guitar from the factory would have been. This one had a Maestro tailpiece factory installed, which I took off because I didn't, it just makes it go out of tune, but that's what that looks like. It would go on here like this, and then the strings would just rock over the tailpiece, which is not a great idea. Okay, and this is the last version of what they would call TV yellow. This is very, very late in a double cut. It's a solid, almost finish. You'll notice that you can't see the wood grain because it's almost like a solid paint. And a lot of people refer to this finish as banana yellow. And it's a really late, it's probably a 61, because the finish is so thick you can't really see the serial number. And it might even be impressed. Up until this point, they are stamp numbers. They're stamp numbers in ink. Can you guys see that ink number there? And then they go to an impressed number, which is what happens to all the SGs. They're all impressed. And this is the very, very last version of a TV Yellow Junior. This one is a 61, probably late 61. You'll notice that the Les Paul or TV model is gone from the headstock. There's all kinds of opinions on why they stopped calling them Les Pauls. There was some kind of feud with Les Paul and Gibson. He wanted his name off of them. He never liked the SGs. He didn't want his name associated with the SGs. That's what some people say. To be honest, from people I know that talked to him, and I've talked to him just a little bit before he passed, I think he related this guitar to his wife, to be honest with you, his ex-wife. So I think when it got to that point, he didn't want anything to do with it. So this is a very rare guitar. They didn't make many of these TV model SG Juniors. This is one of the guitars that I looked for a long, long time. One of the very last guitars in my collection that I got was this guitar. And it has the impressed serial number. It's a 5-digit number. One thing I want to say, when it comes to Les Pauls, there's like a, like I say, in my mind, there's like a family. There's like the little kid version, which is the Melody Maker, which I did not bring any of. I love Melody Makers, but, there's just so many weird ones that would take forever. So there's the Melody Maker, and then there's the Junior, which was kind of like the next step up, It's a one single coil P90 pickup. Juniors are always one pickup. And then the next model is the Special. The Special is two P90s, and with all Les Pauls, they start out as single cutaways. It's the same way with Melody Makers, Juniors, Standards. They're all single cut. Specials, they're all single cut in the beginning. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to start in 55. By the way, if anybody has any questions about the Juniors at all. Well, supposedly when they started television, the other guitars would not show up. The sunburst ones, the dark sunburst ones. So supposedly they made them to show up on television. I don't know if any of that's true. At that time period, there was like an obsession with modernism, and if you notice the tables of the time had almost a similar finish, like a lime finish. I think they were just trying to go with the fads of the day. I have no idea. I think television sounded like a new highfalutin name to put on it, Yeah, like rocket ship kind of name. Yeah. So this is a 56 Special, and you'll notice the finish is sort of like the first Junior, but there's a lot more yellow. This is a 6-digit serial number, so the other guitar was earlier, and it was still very brown. I mean, really, basically, there was no yellow. And this one is kind of brown. It's not really yellow. It's more of a, I don't know, I'd say it's like a wheat. Still see a lot of grain. This is what a 56, looks like. I mean, a 55 looks like this. And into 56, they're very similar, too. One thing I would say, all of these guitars, the original switch tuner tips, always shrink and break. So I may pass them around later if you try not to tune them, because they will break probably. I don't care, I might have changed the tips on some of them, but if you see them, they look bad, No. He asked me if they reset the serial numbers every year. Okay, here's speculation on my part. From seeing the serial number logs, from talking to other collectors. Let's just say Gibson they were pretty loose with serial numbers. You can ask yourself, why would you use the same serial number 3, 4, 5, 6 times? And there's multiple reasons. Why would Gibson have multiple fires that destroy serial numbers? Why would you do that? I mean, or maybe it was all accidents, who knows? But the serial numbers are very confusing, and my personal opinion is, when you have loose accounting, you can sell the same guitar 6 times. See what I'm saying? I think there's a lot of that was going on, because I've personally looked in the log and saw the same number on 6 guitars. So, I mean, it could have to do with like different management, not keeping track of stuff, but man. Another thing I'd like to say is all my guitars, most of them are in brown hard cases, but Juniors and Specials almost always came in soft cases, like this. And the reason mine are not in these is because these cases suck. They break, they fall apart. I have a pile of these somewhere. But generally, I mean, they occasionally came in hard cases, but almost always they came in these. Okay, that was a 55, and then you notice the brown finish. This is a 56. This is a really clean example of a 56, and it actually did come with this case, I believe. And notice it's kind of a lot thicker and a lot more yellow, a lot less brown. And you can notice how clean the tuners are, and I changed the tips because they fell apart. Another thing that I would say, like to show you about these guitars, the specials and the juniors, is the bridges, the longer they made them, the farther away they got. So and also the earlier bridges are wider. They're thicker and wider. And the reason is, and this is true with almost all Gibson guitars, when they first made them, the neck angles are often bad. And they did that even into 58, like when they first made the 335s, the angles were bad, the bridges were tiny. So the earlier juniors have really thin bridges, and they get thicker, and they get farther away. And the reason is they're figuring out the intonation. They're figuring out, these guitars don't stay in tune up here. And why they were still doing that in 58 when they had figured it out, earlier on other guitars, I don't know. But so that's some of the minutia. How far away the pole piece is from the pickup, I look at that right away and I can almost guess what year it is just from seeing so many. Okay, so we're gonna plow through the specials because I want to get the cool guitars. So this is a double cutaway Les Paul special in cherry finish. Another thing that's kind of confusing is on the TV model specials, they actually called those specials. So the juniors that were TV, they called TV models, but the specials that were TV finish, they called specials. I have no idea why. But so those are actually called specials, not TV models. And this is a double cut. My eyes are getting worse. 1959. So in 58, as I said earlier, they went to the double cut guitars. Same thing happened to the specials. They went to the double cut guitars and they were very square. This guitar is not quite as square. It's an early 59, but it's kind of square. And it is cherry finish. And I kept this one because it's got like really figured mahogany, which is odd. I don't know if you guys can see that, but all the wood is figured. These guitars were prone to have a lot of neck issues because the way the body joined the neck, when they cut the pickup in here, they cut away the neck tenon. So often these guitars will have a lot of heel issues and breaks and stuff like that. This is a TV special, which is one of the rarest guitars in the world. There's not many of these. It has a crack in the headstock. I bought it from a friend of mine who collects in Japan, and that's why it's in that case, is because it came all the way from there to here. And you can't send them in these little cardboard cases. So. This was also one of the rarest and hardest to find guitars in my entire collection. Even though it's not extremely valuable, there's probably only a handful of these. It is a 1961. You'll notice it doesn't say Les Paul Special, just like the other one. So at that point, Les Paul was done with them. The contract was over. They were still making the same guitars without his name on them. And I still include those in my collection because it's kind of the last of those guitars, even though they don't really say Les Paul. So at this time, it's really confusing. Even though this is a TV finish, the way this guitar would be designated with Gibson, it would be the same designation as if it was white. They called the white ones TV finish too. It's confusing. So they made white ones like this. They made a handful of TVs, and they made cherry ones. And this is a cherry one. This is what everyone would be like at this point. Everyone was cherry. They didn't do sunburst anymore. After they stopped doing the single cut guitars, they went to the double cuts. Everyone was cherry finish, unless you paid the extra money for a white or a TV. So this is basically what you would have got in the store in 1961 or 2. It's really clean. This is the very, very end of what I consider to be the Les Paul family, or the classic Les Pauls. I kept this guitar, when I collect guitars, I kind of have like categories. Sometimes I'll keep something because it's just so freaking clean, I just can't get rid of it. This is one of those guitars. And also, I'm like a huge Pete Townsend fan. So this is like the Pete Townsend guitar, and it weighs like nothing. It's like literally like air. But, you know, it's not that special. I mean, you could get on G-Bass or Reverb, and there's probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 of these for sale. So that's it, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, let me know.